Figures show that the number of people dying during the winter months rose by nearly a third in England and Wales last year.
Most of the deaths are among people aged over 75. They're caused by respiratory illnesses, often made worse by the cold. But what should people do if they're worried about the cost of heating and keeping their homes warm?
Paul Lewis from Radio 4's Money Box programme has been looking into this for us. And just look at a figure. I mean, I know you're looking through these figures, but what are these extra number of deaths from?
Well, if you look historically, these numbers have been coming down. If you go back, for example, to 1960, there were nearly 70,000 excess winter deaths. And they came down. They go up and down year by year if you get flu epidemics, things like that. By 2010, they'd reached just under 26,000. And then the winter before last, 2011-12, they came down again to 24,200. But then last winter, we saw this sudden rise by about nearly a third, 29%, to 31,100 in England and Wales. And if you add in Scotland and Northern Ireland, it's well over 33,000 excess winter deaths. Now, you mentioned respiratory illnesses. What causes this? No one is quite sure how much of this is due simply to its being colder. The World Health Organization estimates maybe about a third of it. So that's about 10,000 deaths in the UK last winter due to being cold at home. But I have to say, other research hasn't found that, and they say it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, whether you live in well-insulated or not. So there are arguments about it, but certainly the World Health Organization thinks it's cold, and respiratory illness, cardiovascular problems get worse in the cold, as doctors have told us on this programme before.
And now the obvious answer in a way is to keep your house warmer. That's going to incur more costs if we have another severe winter. And is it stereotyping to suggest that the over 75s, this age group we're talking about, are the least likely to take a risk with whether or not you can pay? Because, you know, certain generations are more likely to, if you like, take that gamble. They're very, you know, people worry about getting into debt.
People do worry about getting into debt, and there are two things really here. First of all, does insulation help? Well, not surprisingly, the National Insulation Association told me this morning the excess winter deaths are partly caused by poor insulation. And if you look at some research, it shows the older the house you live in, which pretty much means the worse it's insulated, the higher the excess winter deaths. So it does seem to have a relationship. And of course there are ways to get your home insulated. The Energy Saving Trust has a helpline, and that can help you find local schemes to get insulation, so that will help. But you know, you talked about being afraid of getting into debt. 70% of older people own their home. There is no point in living in a property worth £100,000 and being afraid of spending the money on a £500 or £600 or £1,000 fuel bill. And you can borrow money against the value of your home. Doesn't help tenants, of course, but it could be a way out for a lot of people. Borrow the money. It's not a disaster to borrow, even when you're over 75.
But what sort of place should we be borrowing it from? Because obviously, you know, people will be really concerned about that.
Well, you take equity release on your house, which means you use the value to take out what's called a lifetime mortgage. People are very resistant to doing this. But, you know, what's the point of living and dying in something worth, I don't know, a pool's win, if you're cold at home? So use the value of that property. That certainly is one answer.
Very good, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. It is 6:43. This is Breakfast from BBC News. Our main